Hi, welcome to Live on KEXP at Home. I'm your host, DJ Morgan from listener-powered independent 90.3 FM KEXP in Seattle. We stream online at kexp.org all over the world and on our mobile apps. And we are so happy to continue to connect you with live music as we continue to remain socially distant and working from home as much as possible. And all of that is made possible with your support. So thank you so much for supporting KEXP. And we are so happy to be joined today by Julian Saporiti of No Boy. Hi.
Hey, how's it going, Morgan?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's sunny in Portland, so that's always a festive day.
Up north, it is not sunny. It is cloudy and rainy, which is great because it has been unusually warm this year, so we need the rain.
It's true. My mom's garden, which I work in a lot, is a little dry, so we're hoping for more rain. But gosh darn, doesn't the sun feel good in the Northwest? Right?
You cannot complain about a sunny day in the Northwest, that is for sure. So you're in your apartment in Portland, yeah?
Yeah, I'm in my very, very studio apartment. Yeah.
I know you've lived in various places around the U.S. How long have you been in Portland?
I mean, my mom moved out here from Nashville, which is where I'm from originally, about 3 or 4 years ago. And so I finished up my coursework at Brown, where I was doing my PhD, and I just have to do some writing now. And thought Portland was a good place. My girlfriend loves it here too. It seems like artsy, and I really like that it's like super fashion low key. Like I can just wear chacos and anything, and it's okay. Like there's no thought. It's like the least fashion conscious city I've ever been in, and that's so refreshing for me.
I know. I love the PNW vibe of like, it does not matter how fancy of a thing you are going to, like jeans are still totally fine.
Yeah, just Subarus, Patagonia, and overalls and whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Well, congratulations on your amazing new record called 1975 that just came out on April 2nd. We love it so much, and we're so happy to have you here, and I'm really excited to talk to you about this record. I think beyond the fact that musically it is very gorgeous, the concept behind it, I think, is just so fascinating. I'm so excited to talk to you about it. For those who are not familiar with your work, would you mind giving us a little background about your journey through life and music and academia and sort of how you landed on this record, 1975, and what the sort of concept is behind it?
Yeah, Morgan. I mean, it's been a circuitous journey. Like I said, I was born in Nashville and very much raised in the music industry. My dad worked on Music Row, so I had this weird childhood of, indie rock scene on one hand, folk music and like literal country music stars around all the time at the house and stuff growing up. Then I went to Boston and was in a band at Berklee College of Music. And we got signed to this European record deal when we were like 19. And so we would play like Glastonbury Festival and this crazy stuff and like put out vinyl records, like basically everything that my high fidelity loving brain wanted when I was like 15. Like all the bucket list stuff was checked by the time I was 25.
Wow.
And then I kind of realized like, oh, you're just a kid in a band, which means in the 90s and 2000s, you're kind of a jerk a little bit, And you're just, a very emotionally stunted person with a lot of interesting life experience. And so I wanted to do something different. So I moved west. I went out to Wyoming, and I went to a graduate program in American Studies. So I was basically climbing rocks and studying like history for 2 years. And then I became a teacher at that school at Wyoming, and I loved it. And then someone said you should get a PhD because they'll pay you more. And so I applied to these schools, and I went to Providence, Rhode Island, to Brown. And somewhere along the way, somewhere in Wyoming, I got really into Asian America. And I'm obviously a very Asian presenting person. My mom's Vietnamese, so growing up in Nashville was always kind of weird because, again, like things have changed. The 80s and the 90s was like so different in Nashville. A lot of just like outward like racist stuff, which wasn't cool. And just suppressing that because you're just around white kids, so you want to try to be as white as possible. And so finally in Wyoming, I found like these historical moments that I was coming across when I was just on these rock climbing trips, like up at Heart Mountain and this Japanese internment camp, and down to Rock Springs, this horrible Chinese massacre. And I started being really interested in this history and being like, okay, I look like these people. I should learn about this history. And that finally led me into conversations with my own family, these Vietnamese refugees who mostly went to France and, like my mom, to America. And it was just like, overwhelming. And I had quit playing music at this point. And it was just all through my master's and my PhD research. And then eventually, sort of like when I was 15, when I started writing songs, I was so overwhelmed by life at that point that the songs just poured out of me. I think most artists can relate to that. You're very inspired when you're a kid, when you first start. And this was kind of like a second inspiration, because all this dissertation material, you know, about all these like jazz bands who formed in like these Japanese concentration camps, or the rock bands that my mom hung out with in Saigon, who were incredible. You know, all these little stories of daily life that filled in like my Asian American experience, which I had never seen on TV or in history books. It overwhelmed me, and I was just home with my mom one winter break, and I just started writing all of this research, all these oral histories I'd collected, all these books I'd read. They just became songs. And 1975 is 11 or 12 of them that like is part of this huge 70-plus song project, just kind of detailing all these different diverse, interesting Asian American and immigrant and refugee histories. So it's just trying to, you know, just use music to get people in, where in my field, or one of my fields, like academic argument, if you get 20 people at a conference hearing your paper, that's awesome. So I felt like, you know, I have this tool set from being a musician. Why not use it to spread this to a few more people, you know?
Yeah. I imagine you probably still had to actually write out a dissertation, because that's the traditional way to do college, right? To get your PhD accomplished. But how much of that were you able to actually present the audio recordings of your songs 1975 as part of your academic dissertation?
Yeah, so I mean, that's still in progress, because I haven't been able to really talk to my committee that much because of the pandemic and stuff like that. So some research got pushed off, but it's about a third music. Like Chapter 3 is just this album and like very, very extensive liner notes. And then Chapter 2 is more of like some films thrown in there, kind of showing how you can bridge hardcore academic research with a more like public-facing project. And then Chapter 1 is very much like academic prose. So it's a nice balance. And I'm really fortunate that my advisor and my committee let me do this, because I think, you know, honestly, it's a way we got to go as far as academics, because I got the utmost respect for this just incredible research that these people do, that we do. But I want more people, especially, you know, what we're seeing right now with like, you know, the Asian American conversation that's happening. You know, this stuff's always been happening, but why are we just getting to it? Maybe that's because we haven't really been able to disseminate this information well enough, coupled with people wanting to learn about it for the first time.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, obviously our textbooks are nowhere near comprehensive as to the true history of world events or American events in American history. But also, you know, reading a textbook when you're a young person is a very dry experience a lot of the times, unless you're a super avid reader of nonfiction. So I love that idea of inspiring people to learn more via mediums that are more inspirational to them, like music, like you say. What is the significance of the year 1975? I know that's the year of the so-called fall of Saigon, but did that have a personal connection for you as well?
Yeah, I mean, my mom left in 68, and then the rest of my family left after 75, didn't get out right away. So that specific year, it's just more of like a general nod to that's when everything changes for us, you know. Millions of people who are affected by this, refugee situation from Southeast Asia. It's an incredibly important kind of like almost unreal demarcation of time. The fact that there can be a year that means so much is wild, because that means that, you know, those people, my mom included, it's just a point of no return. You know, if you're on that losing side, if you're on that southern side in the Vietnam War. I just wanted to name the album that. Everything I do is like really nerdy Easter eggs. Like there's going to be like 10 people who get really into this album and look up everything that's in a music video or like in this background behind me or the name of the band, right? And so that's all purposeful. That's like the teacher in me being like, I'm not just going to tell you what all this stuff is, but let me leave you these breadcrumbs and like, for me, like obsessing over what Stuart Murdoch's Glasgow was like listening to Bell and Sebastian record, right? Or like Mountain Goat songs. These really deep, lyrically driven musics, like, yeah, it's just going deep into album covers. What happens if you use all of that stuff to then blow the doors open on a history? That's kind of the project, I guess. So hidden
That's
teaching.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that. I was going to ask you next, for those who don't know, what is that reference, No No Boy?
Yeah, I mean, so for a KEXP audience, I think the first thing you need to do is look up the song No No Boy, because it's by this Japanese post-Beatles band called the Spiders, and they're just amazing. But the book, which is published by Washington and Seattle, No No Boy is like one of the first classic Asian American novels. And it also signals to this group of Japanese Americans who, basically, I'll just say it's a hidden history within a hidden history. And whoever you are listening or watching this, you should Google that. And I'm still stoked because anytime you Google the band name, it's just the book comes up. So you at least have to wade through that. And I'm sure at least a dozen people have bought that book, which is any teacher's goal.
Nice. See, we are already building a syllabus for our viewers to go forth and do that at the end of this performance. So setting aside the content, speaking musically about the songs, how did you land on the sounds that you ended up making to back these amazing stories on this record?
Yeah, well, thanks for saying all those nice things. I appreciate it, and I'm thoroughly embarrassed. But the sounds are a cool part of this record because, I mean, it's generally, most of the songs were written, I was still am, very poor doctoral student, living off TA money. And so, just did not have like a music studio anymore like I did when I was younger to futz around in, or a band. So everything was just kind of folky, just acoustic guitar, me singing, a harmony singer, always trying to include a harmony singer. And that's just like where I'm from. From Nashville, so that's kind of music I play. But for this record, because a record label put it out, Smithsonian Folkways, they gave me a little bit of money so I could produce it like more properly. And I thought it'd be really cool to use all these field recordings I had done during my dissertation research, going to these detention centers down at the border, going to Angel Island, the Pacific immigration station in the U.S. outside San Francisco from the turn of the century. And I'd be knocking on like barrack wood, or just like running my hands through gravel, or just capturing the ambient sound. And since this record was coming out on Folkways, I was like, well, I mean, what is folk music now, right? It's mostly kids with laptops, like cutting up samples, like whether it's hip hop or like Animal Collective stuff or whatever. How do I chop these sounds up? So not only am I singing about this history, right? Singing about these places, but then when I'm actually in the studio recording and singing these songs, I can have the sounds of the gravel footsteps, or the internment camp wood, or just the wind or the rain going by, or some of the oral histories I collected, conversations with my family or people who had been through this stuff. Just having those voices and sounds as the sonic foundation was so fascinating to me. So I would build all my drum kits out of those field recordings, those samples, run them through all these guitar pedals and effects, and then I would play my folky little stuff on top of it.
Oh, I love that idea of integrating place into your actual songs. That's so cool. I want to talk to you a little bit more about that concept a little bit later, but you recorded a live performance video for us along with your partner Emilia Halvorsen. I want to get into the first couple of songs from this. We're going to hear Saint Denis and then Khmerica. Before we begin this first song, can you tell us a little bit about this first song, Saint Denis?
Yeah, Saint Denis is where my grandmother lived towards the end of her life. So she was a Vietnamese refugee, like a lot of us, and she ended up in Paris, like a lot of us. And she was a really devout woman, this really beautiful, very small woman, lived till I'm pushing 90 at least. And I just remember at the end of her life, she was living with these nuns in Saint Denis, and I would go to these trips to Paris to visit her, and I hadn't kept up my French, which was our second language at home. And I felt really bad because I started having all these questions I wanted to ask her. And this song is basically just like what most of this project is, an encouragement to ask your elders about the things they saw, and then share that. I think a lot of the issues we're facing is just people not realizing these moments, these terse and violent events are echoes and reverberations of histories we've already lived through in a lot of ways, because we haven't dealt with those like original like happenings, and so it's just a song about wishing I had asked more questions of my grandma, when she was around.
Yeah. This is Saint Denis from No No Boy live on KEXP at home.
Hi, I'm Julian, and live on KEXP, this is No No Boy. This first song I'm gonna do is about my grandma, my Bangwai. It's called Saint Denis. Soft language barrier, the child of an immigrant. Before the banh mi trucks were cool, lunch table embarrassment. But seen with the border guard last night on a continent. What was the view like, knowing that you might never come back again? There are so many things I wish I'd have asked of you. Sometimes family trees cut cruel. What did you make of Tennessee? In 1988, all covered in snow. The winter my little brother was born, and we carried him up the hill to a home. I wish I had taken French a little more seriously. I remember singing to you when you were dying in Saint Denis. There are so many things I wish I'd have asked you then. Sometimes songs don't get a nice end. All right, this next one's called Khmerica, and it goes precisely like this. Some nights I'm a tourist to my kind. Landscape caught within a frame, a glimpse of another side. Call you in my best Khmerican. Painter, pick up your round brush and fill the details in. Be my eyes, be my eyes. Cracked paint, a place enchanted, the colors of your life. Sunsets playing on the temple, and you who survived. Be my eyes, be my eyes. Some kids move because their parents take new jobs. Some kids move because of napalm. Cracked paint, a place enchanted, the colors of your life. Sea emery bathed in gold and umber, and palm trees climb so high. Sunsets playing on the temple, and you who survived. Be my eyes, Father, oh, be my eyes. Be my eyes, Father, oh, be my eyes. Said the moon ain't sitting right when you wanted to marry mom. Be my eyes, Father, oh, be my eyes. Be my eyes, Father, oh, be my eyes. A little rust on the rock and roll, but made it happen. All right.
It's No No Boy live on KEXP at home. I'm DJ Morgan from KEXP speaking to Julian Saporiti of No No Boy. That was Khmerica. Before that, you heard Denis. What's the song Khmerica about?
Khmerica, that's a good story. So I taught one class at Brown while I was a PhD student there. Called No No Boy, because I'm very unoriginal, I guess. But it was just basically using these songs as a model, right? Saying, ask your parents, ask your grandparents what they've been through, and then turn it into art. Do anything but write a paper. Do anything but write a paper, because no one's ever said to their friends, like, hey, man, I wrote this killer 5-page essay. Check it out. But they have said, like, hey, listen to my song or my podcast or my movie or whatever. So there were these two kids who were both Cambodian American, who were Khmer, and their family had come over as refugees, and Madhavan and Nicolina. And one day they were talking before class, and I come in, and Nicolina's like, "Yeah, I was talking to Dad last night, and I was trying to speak in my best Khmerican. And just as a songwriter, I always listen for words that I haven't heard before. And I was like, Khmerican. It's just like, oh, it got all those K's. It sounds neat. And I was like, hey, what does that mean? And they looked at me like I was an idiot, teaching an Asian American studies class, not knowing or putting it together. But they were like, that's like our language, like Khmer, Khmer, like our Spanglish, like Khmerican. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. That should be a song. And they were like, yeah, it should. You should write a song about that. So a semester goes on, and they kind of cornered me at one point, like in the hallway. I remember this vividly, and they're like, "Hey, have you wrote Khmerica yet? Have you written Khmerica yet?" And I was like, "Have you done your final projects yet?" And they were like, "Oh no." And I was like, "Okay, well, I'll trade you, but you got to give me something to write about, right?" So Nicolina does this interview for her final project, just like I was saying for Denis, just sitting down with her dad and interviewing him on the phone, and she gives me that interview to just sit with, and she also gives me all these paintings that he's done. And he's a great painter, turns out, and paints the most beautiful symbol of Cambodia, the Angkor Wat temples, at the most beautiful times of day, sunrise and sunset. And then I listened to the recording, this 30-minute phone call between a daughter and a father. And I'm just sitting in it. I played over and over. And it's these stories of, living through American bombings, living through trouble with the Vietnamese, living through the Khmer Rouge, which kills like a quarter of the country. Jeez. And there's also these stories about how the family had a cow named Horse. Just weird, stupid stuff. That's just wonderful and beautiful. And I guess it just reminded me of the conversation I never had with my grandmother, or the conversations that I've since had with my mom, of just a child asking a parent these impossible questions. Tell me about living through a genocide. Tell me about living through napalm. Tell me about living through a war. And there's no success in the answers, because you're never going to recount that stuff. And honestly, maybe you shouldn't, if you've gotten away from it. But there's a success in the trying, in the sitting with those questions. And that just stuck with me. I was just so grateful for, that project that she gave me.
Yeah. Like building up the courage to ask those really hard, big questions it gets you to the more slice of life things that make people who they are.
Yeah, I mean, you have to contextualize it, or else it's just numbers and dates and tragedy.
Right.
And that's not what the majority of life is. Like, my mom was around bombings and, military occupation a couple times over growing up when she did in Vietnam, and, the death of family members that she witnessed. But that's not what she tells. Like, she doesn't define herself as a refugee, immigrant. These are flat terms, which honestly we need to do a better job of expanding. And how do you do that? You find those quotidian stories. You find the everyday, the things that you and I relate to. That's why I gravitate so much towards like people who played music in these historical situations, because presidents or generals never meant anything to me in high school. Like you were saying earlier, right? Like reading books was never my thing. But records, like what I learned from, just With God on Our Side by Dylan, when my dad like put it on in the car, like changed my life. Still this record's in the shadow of that song and so many others. And yeah.
What do you think it is about music that speaks so universally to people and is one of the most, I think, uniting things in humanity? What do you think it is about that?
I mean, it's like, what's the thing about sunsets, right? It's just, it's just the magic of like natural properties at their most beautiful kind of mutation. So like colors reflecting at certain angles of the sun, as the earth's spinning or whatever it is. And music is just airwave manipulations. And some people know how to do that really, really, really well, with their voice or with their instrument. And then it's also just how you change language in your mouth, like the words and the ability to find rhythm and cadence and put those together in a way that's sonically pleasing or emotionally arresting or intellectually interesting. It's why people like music is the same thing that could be asked of why do we, love a really, really good, meal, or why do we like being hugged? It's just something that happens, combination of the emotional response to this incredible physical thing, this physical world event that happens. I mean, that's what music is. Like, it's so like, shouldn't take for granted.
Absolutely. So you made a couple of documentary films. There's one on your website right now, nonoboyproject.com, that I highly recommend people check out. It's a 30-minute short film called 1975. You go into sort of the backstory of you traveling and researching parts of your dissertation and working in the stories into the record 1975. Can you talk about some of the places around the U.S. that you visited and what were some moments that really stuck out to you? Absolutely.
I mean, it's been my life, whether it's been a touring musician or as a academic, has always been based in kind of like traveling, touring around, and so I think of when I go do research, much like being on tour, except for I don't have to play gigs, which is kind of relaxing. But I do have to go to former like concentration camp sites and current day detention centers. So like that documentary you referenced, which my friend Albert and Charlie directed, that just is, we're kind of going down to the border where I've spent a lot of time the last 2 years. Because like I did a tour, I tried to tour this normally like in 2018, and it broke me. I just couldn't do it. It's just such a bummer set to play. It's not like just singing love songs and then having people applaud your melodic genius or something. This is like having to teach a class and then stick around for office hours afterwards. And so it really bummed me out, and I just wanted to do something different. So not just do the normal touring thing. And so I also kept hearing all this stuff about the border, kids in cages, and all these like people crying about it and stuff. And I felt sad too, but I wanted to see what was actually happening, and I'm a lucky enough person that I, could get some money to play a concert and fly down and do a research trip on the back of that. So I'd go down to the border to these refugee camps, these places where refugees had come over, like the Holding Institute in Laredo that my friend Mike runs, or on the other side, like in Matamoros, Mexico. And it's just thousands of people like who we were holding at the border. Like, thankfully, Biden's lifting up the refugee thing a little bit right now, but still not enough.
Right.
And I was just seeing these kind of overlaying images, because I'd spent years just digging through archival photographs and video. And I was very used to, like, the Japanese internment photos or the Vietnam War refugee photos, people who were just kind of ostracized and cast out and sort of denied humanity by the state in some way, either by rejection or incarceration. And then you go down to a place like Dilley, Texas, which has like the biggest women and children, the family detention center in the country. And you talk to the people who have been in there, talk about them trying to just walk all the way up Mexico, like literally walk up Mexico to get away from whatever Central American country they come from because of like gang violence and extortion, and them being kidnapped at the border and having to pay ransom, and then only to cross the river and be detained by ICE. And to be outside of those places, to play concerts around those spaces, you know, learning, like, I don't really care if people learn about Asian American history, to be honest, or history in general, if they don't do anything or relate it to the present moment. Because it's like, it's fine. And that's why I use history with these songs, because it's a lot easier, and there's a tint of nostalgia, no matter what it is, if you go back far enough, that it's easier to process, right? Even something like the Vietnam War, which is incalculably horrible to my family and so many other people. But at the border, it's too raw right now. So if you play a concert in like Missouri or Wyoming or Kansas, some bar or some church or some high school, God forbid, and you're just singing folk songs, and you sing about the past, and you tell them, hey, this is what my family went through in 1975 or whatever. Hey, this is what some Asian Americans went through back in the 1800s, you know. Pretty rough stuff, but it's far away enough that you can kind of put a frame around it, so to speak. If you then put in what you've seen down at the border and say, there's a lot of parallels to what my family went through, having to leave a place you didn't want to leave. But my mom got refuge here, and it saved her life, you know, saved so many thousands of other people's lives. I can tell you people that I've met who are stuck down in Mexico right now, who don't get that same privilege, who are just as deserving, just as good, just as kind, and that all aside, just as human. And so, yeah, a lot of the travels of the last few years have been trying to see these echoes firsthand, not just theorize them in books or articles or hear people talk about them at conferences, but to just go down, play music in those spaces, help out where you can, do a little service. And then, you know, when you do have the opportunity to come on a radio station like this, maybe talk about like my friend Anahi, who crossed the Rio Grande, dealt with extortion, kidnappers, paying ransom, you know, threatened life and limb, only to be picked up and put into an ICE detention center, to then make her way to New Jersey around family, where she was living in like an apartment, like I'm in, like studio apartment with her whole family, extended family there, got COVID, lost her job as a waitress, undocumented, and all the while having to pay thousands of dollars for lawyer fees just to have a chance to do what you and I, you know, take for granted every day, which is live here.
Yeah. Ugh, that's very powerful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
You talk in that same documentary about how we usually experience history through what people have witnessed or what people have seen. And going back to adding in those field recordings to your songs, you talk about experiencing history through sound of the place. What were some of your favorite field recordings that you collected during your time out there?
It's tough because they've been so mutated now by all like the sampling and the processing, and they all just are like drum kits. But I think there's like this place in Oregon, in Eastern Oregon, called Baker City, and Emilia, my partner, who has basically done everything from co-produce the record to sew my jacket.
And she's in the videos too.
Yeah, she's in the videos. We were just driving when we were moving out west a couple of years ago, or maybe we weren't even moving. We were just driving out west, and we stopped in Baker City, a random city to me, in Oregon. And we got a room at the Super 8 motel, like one of those $40 a night hotels. And across the street was like this like Asian-looking, like red-roofed, like pavilion. And we walk across the street, and it's a Chinese cemetery, just right by the highway, right across from the Super 8. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
You know, it's so random and so interesting. But that's the thing about Asian American history in particular, it's so invisible. It's scattered throughout the West. There's like Chinese Massacre Cove, Oregon, all these places that like have the names stitched into our map, but we just ignore. And so there was a sound or a collection of sounds from that cemetery. I just went over with a field recorder, and Emilia and I were just like kind of just dropping gravel on the tin roof of, I guess, this tomb, and listening to the sound of that, like, it's not called a pagoda, wrong language, but that kind of pavilion, that Chinese, that Chinese red roof tiled kind of thing. And just, I love those sounds because it was just, to me, like I'm fond of saying, we're so deaf to history. We think of it visually so much. We think of how the person looked who said these words, and we read their words. We don't think about like the tone of their voice, which is so important when we read these quotes. And so just to find that random Super 8 Chinese cemetery, these dudes who came over, worked the railroads, worked the mines, and now are just kind of there by the Super 8 and the highway. I don't know if they have any family that ever goes out and visits, but these ghosts scattered all around. I liked recovering those sounds, so to speak. And those meant a lot because it was not like a place I'd ever heard of before. But it just shows you, if you just look around the corner, it's like, that's the thesis, right? Talk to your grandma and you're going to find out really interesting stuff. Like turn over a rock, you're going to find some kind of history.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking about the place names in the U.S. that are not as specific as having like,
right.
Chinese in the name, where you're like, what happened there? You gotta right. wonder what happened there. Like,
absolutely.
Point Misery Road. Why?
Well, I mean, there's like, there's like a dead Indian hill in every Western town. Some really messed up stuff that we just drive on every day without thinking about. And to just stop and be mindful of the past, like I said, to try to make the future better. It's an important thing to do. And just listening or just studying the map a little bit, or giving yourself an easy reading list for a weekend. These are some ways to live.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of a reading list, I want to get into this next song. And this song is not on the record. Mm-mm. And it's also, I also want to mention too that you have an article that's being released at the same time as this video is launching on our KEXP YouTube channel. As folks are reflecting during May, during Asian and Pacific American Heritage Month, what are some books or some music or sources that folks can really dig on this month? And can you tell us about this next song, Hapa Book Club?
Yeah, I think it's the same answer. So the song, full title, Hapa Book Club in praise of Japanese breakfast Nina and Luling. I think a lot of your listeners probably know Japanese breakfast, Michelle Zauner, who just put out a book, which is worth checking out, Crying in H Mart. This project, in some ways, like the research has been happening for about a decade, but I started writing the songs about 5 years ago in earnest. And part of that was directly due to this conversation, which I'm sure Michelle has no recollection of, this interview I had with her. Because I was thinking as I was doing all this research, like, when I was playing Glastonbury Festival in 2007, I don't remember any other Asian people on stage. And I know they'd been sprinkled throughout my musical life, like Karen O or James Iha or Eddie Van Halen. But I think, like I said, growing up in Nashville, I wanted to push myself so far away of identifying as Asian that I didn't even recognize when some of my heroes were Asian people, because I was so embarrassed by it. Because I got called Jackie Chan, and that was about it, And then there's some actual beatings that happened because of it and stuff. It's just not great. But as I got older, and then I wasn't in music business anymore, I saw a poster for this artist, Japanese Breakfast, outside the Columbus Theater in Providence, where I was living. And I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. How cool is it to have to just be proud of being Asian, or just to advertise in some way? Later, I realized she was Korean, and it was a very clever, kind of a winking name. But I got in touch with her. I don't even know if she had a publicist at the time, because it was right before I think the first album blew up. But I said, hey, can I interview you for my dissertation, because I'm so interested in seeing another Asian in indie rock, and knowing that she had toured with Mitski. Wow, oh my gosh, that would have been cool. And so I sat down with her in the Columbus Theater, which the great band The Low Anthem runs in Providence, and we sat in their studio, and I just talked to her for half an hour. She's very generous. She talked about growing up in Eugene, Oregon, and just being a Havsy person, a Hapa mixed race person. And I felt so much just kinship because I had so many of the same experiences. I think she's about my age. And she talked about how in college, some private school college kid, I think creative writing major or something, she wanted to be like Raymond Carver, like the writer. And I was thinking like, man, like, yeah, when I was in a band, like all of my protagonists were white. Like from personal experience, they just got transformed. I imagined like white kids. How messed up is that? Like you don't even write, you're so ashamed of your race because there's no representation because of the bullying you face, whatever, that you don't even write yourself into your songs, or rather, you write yourself out of your own songs. So talking to her really did something to me, and I told her about these writers I knew, Luling Osofsky, who wrote this incredible essay called Wild, Wild East, which you can look up online. It changed my life, was the foundation for this project in a lot of ways, all about the hidden Asianness everywhere, like we were just talking about, especially out west in Wyoming, where her and I both lived. And then there was also Luling's friend, my friend Nina McConnachly, who wrote this incredible book called Cowboys and East Indians. Nina's South Asian and white. And I just thought about like these three women, these incredible writers, these incredible authors, these incredible poets, and how I wish I had that book list when I was like a 10-year-old kid growing up in Tennessee, and how much good that would have done for me, not just for the race stuff, but for the gender stuff too, I can tell you. And man, like, so I went home, and when I started writing those songs, this was a winter break I was talking about, I was transcribing all these interviews, and my interview with Michelle was like next on, like amidst like World War II concentration camp survivors and Vietnam War refugees, like all these oral histories, I just type them up, do the PhD kid thing. And Michelle's interview came on, and I started typing it up, and I had my guitar right there, and I just started singing it, like singing what we were talking about. And then it was a really foundational moment for this project. And so I thought, give her and Nina and Luling a shout out, because man, that's some good stuff. And if anyone wants to start a book list for whatever Asian API, whatever this month is, that's a good place to start.
Perfect. This is Hapa Book Club in praise of Japanese breakfast, Nina Luling. And it's No No Boy live on KEXP at home.
Please feel free to pour yourself a nice cup of tea. Enjoy a cloudy Pacific Northwest afternoon with us. This next tune is called Hapa Book Club, in praise of Japanese breakfast, Nina and Luling. Maybe some new additions for your bookshelf. You said you're working on a memoir about Korean food, and I told you about those writer friends I knew from Laramie. What did you think of Luling's piece? Wild, wild east. In a booth in the low Anthem studio, above the old Columbus Theater, before your gig in mid-December, where we spoke of Raymond Carver in our half-white, halvesy faces, in places like Oregon, forever floating in between. Friend, you're just as scratched as me. You traded songs with Eskimo. I thought of Sean teaching Eskimos on an island in Alaska. which will be gone before we know. You texted your address so I could send you Nina's book, but it's winter break and I've been traveling. I'll send it off tomorrow. Cowboys and East Indians, and I fondly recounted climbing up on rice bags in Lily's parents' grocery, Nashville '93. The meaning of rice, sister, you understand. You know, I thought about your mother when I listened to your album and looked down at the cover. Heaven is a thing, I think. How happy she must be.
It is No No Boy live on KEXP at home. I'm DJ Morgan from KEXP talking to Julian Saporiti of No No Boy. And you just heard Hapa Book Club in praise of Japanese Breakfast Nina and Luling. I wanted to go back to that article that's coming out today as well. That's going to be featured on Earthquaker Devices blog. What's going to be the concept behind that article?
I mean, it's just sort of stretching out, you know, why Japanese Breakfast is such an important artist to me, and a few other contemporary or younger than I am Asian American artists who I want to shout out, and just maybe give people a place to start and take apart a couple of the videos and songs of these artists that I really enjoy. Yeah, just I think you got to celebrate. We write really critically a lot in my field, and I think a big part of the critic is to celebrate and pass along joy through these songs that are like a conduit between all of us.
Oh, I love that. We'll make sure to post a link to that article on the KEXP website as well so that people can find it easily. I also want to let people know about this really great film that you also made, a longer film called Hold Me Lover, Tell Me Lies, that was live streamed for the Smithsonian Folkways Carnegie Hall Voices of Hope Festival just a couple of weeks ago. Can you talk about that experience and that particular film, what angle that took, and then where people can view that as well? Yeah,
it's we'll throw that link down in the comments section for this or whatever, the description. But it's so funny, you know, I was saying before we went on, you know, KEXP, I've always loved the videos and have had dreams of, you know, being able to do one of these sessions, and then it's at home, you know. Right. Carnegie Hall, it's like that times a billion, right? Carnegie Hall asks you to do something. You never dream of that. Like KEXP, okay, indie rock kid, maybe you'll get there someday. But Carnegie Hall, are you kidding me? And then you got to do a video in your studio apartment for them. But we tried to make it as like interesting and again, Easter eggy as possible, secret teaching, but hopefully entertaining. And yeah, it's just some performances and music videos, basically like a visual component for this album, 1975, with some history lessons thrown in there. And some very cheeky homages to Southeast Asian karaoke videos, which my girlfriend Emilia, who basically directed it, and I myself love. So yeah, check it out. Down there in the description. Down there. I highly recommend watching it. I watched it. It's fantastic. So thanks, DJ Morgan. Yeah, definitely check that out. I want to get into the next song. This is from the new record, 1975. It's called Little Saigon. Can you tell us a little bit about this one before we get into it? Yeah, so Little Saigons are real places all over the United States. You got a small but good one hopefully still good post-pandemic in Seattle. And there's like this great pho place that I don't know the name of on this. It's like a corner building, one of those cool triangle-y buildings in your little Chinatown area. And places like that, places like Orange County, California, Northern Virginia, all these like ethnic enclaves of Vietnamese people are so interesting to me because I grew up in Nashville so far away from anything, from any of like my kind, so to speak. So as I came to them later in life, I was like, these are kind of like fantastical little magical doorways of culture and fun, and great food. And so, yeah, I was thinking about a Ron Sexsmith song, actually. Ron Sexsmith, one of the great songwriters of the 20th and 21st century Canadian guy. And I was a kid journalist when I was growing up in Nashville. I wrote for a paper called The Tennessean. And one of my assignments was to review his CD, whatever CD was coming out in his concert when he was coming to Nashville. And so I really loved this song he had called Lebanon, Tennessee. And if you are from Nashville, at least when I was growing up, I don't know if it's changed like so much of the area has, Lebanon, Tennessee was like kind of a crummy place. Like, I mean, no offense to those people, but it's like not a cool place to go. But Ron Sexsmith wrote this song that was like this beautiful pastoral, like amazing, like beautiful love song to Lebanon, Tennessee, my neighboring town. And I got to interview him. I was like, Ron, how did you write this song? Because Lebanon kind of sucks. And he was like, in his wonderful Toronto accent that I can't do or whatever, wherever he's from, he was like, yeah, I was a bike courier when I was younger. And I was like, of course, Ron Sexsmith, the great lyricist, was a bike courier. What a poet's job. And he got this parcel, and he said parcel. I don't say parcel. He said parcel. I got this parcel from, the return address was Lebanon, Tennessee. And I just thought, that sounds like the most wonderful place in the world. And I was like, you've been there since? And he was like, yeah, it's not so great. That's what Little Saigon is for me. It's like, Little Saigons are mostly just like a bunch of concrete, some Vietnamese refugees, the best food you ever had in your life, and some very problematic, divisive Vietnamese politics. It's not like some Forest of Ardennes kind of Shakespearean beautiful thing, but in my mind it is, right? There's a place where I can go, you know, a place to make up for all those years of having no place. And that's what this song's about. It's just like that imagined space, like somewhere between Vietnam and the United States and France, all these places that my family scattered to or remained. And it's a place where you belong if you have a sort of weird looking face relative to your classmates. It's a place where like the language that you should know how to speak, but you don't, makes sense to you magically. And it's a place where you have all the best Vietnamese iced coffee you could ever drink. So that's what the song's about.
The little oasis of home.
Yeah.
This is Little Saigon from No No Boy live on KEXP at Home.
All right, we're going to carry on with a song called Little Saigon. I heard about a place called Little Saigon, where everybody's got my face, so mine won't have to grow so long. Palm trees, a tarry seat, a cafe where I belong. Oh, I think I'd like to go to this place, Little Saigon. One day I'm gonna go to a place called Little Saigon, buy shoes in a little shop and silk from Vietnam. Take lessons on the damp bow and play an old folk song. Oh, I think I'd like to go to this place, Little Saigon. Dieu, je vais aller à Little Saigon. J'enverrai une lettre en français à ma maman. C'est pas Saigon, maman, mais je serai content longtemps. Oh, un jour, je voudrais aller à Little Saigon. One day I'm gonna go to a place called Little Saigon and listen to the CBC band loud with my headphones on. Walk around the indoor mall where the language sounds like song. Oh, un jour, je voudrais aller à Little Saigon. Oh, un jour, je voudrais aller à Little Saigon.
It's No No Boy live on KEXP at home. That was Little Saigon from the new album 1975. Julian, before the pandemic, what kind of audiences and places were you playing?
Yeah, like I said, I tried to do a proper tour. So I went out with a classmate for about 2 months, and it was just too heavy. Like, I was just in a bad place for a lot of different stuff that people go through in life, and a lot of it my own fault, you know, and stuff to learn from. But touring this night after night was just not feasible. And we do a lot of academic shows, like basically colleges could, you know, basically colleges would pay to have us come in, and they got deep pockets. So we'd then take that money and then do like a run of like public high school shows and stuff like that. And then we'd randomly play a bar in the middle of the country because, like I said, this is the reason I use folk music is because you're going to reach more people than a protest march or an academic article. Or it can at least get people to not leave immediately. And so a mixture of stuff, some big, cool gigs, like we played Lincoln Center, so very humbling things. But yeah, the audiences, you know, sometimes you got the hometown shows, like if you play on the West Coast, a bunch of Asians come out and they say, thank you for telling our stories, and that's amazing and great, and you pick up more stories that way. But then you play for like the people who raised me, you know, the conservative white people, Trump voters in Tennessee, people I made friends with, you know, in Wyoming when I lived there. So it was a mix. And to be honest with you, like before the pandemic, like it kind of, any ideas of doing any more tours faded out because it was just too difficult. And yeah, I mean, this is kind of a surprise actually to be talking to people like yourself and promoting a record so seriously. It's a great honor. But yeah, I thought I'd move to Portland and just sort of chill out after finishing my dissertation and just try to help out around here, however, teacher or whatever. But I don't know, maybe do a couple more shows after the pandemic, but it's just not that fun of a, I mean, I'm so curious, someone listening to this or watching this, I feel like I hoodwinked you into a history lesson or something. Yeah, I don't think Modest Mouse is calling to open up any Portland shows anytime soon, but if you're listening,
you never
Isaac,
know.
Let me know. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That would be amazing. It's one of my favorite bands.
Yeah, of course.
I don't think you're hoodwinking anyone because the album itself is a gorgeous piece of art that is beautiful to listen to, and I don't think anybody can expect any more from you than what you have gifted us. So thank you.
That's too kind. I'm very embarrassed, but thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it's a whole honor to be on here because I'm sure I lusted for this when I was 21. It's like, I know KEXP is playing our record, but why aren't we being invited to do something when we're in Seattle, you know? And then you don't care anymore and you do a dissertation and you wind up on frickin' KEXP. So cool.
Well, there's always the future too. The pandemic will hopefully end someday and we will be able to resume being in person, and I would love for you to come into the KEXP studios the next time.
Absolutely. I'll get some of that pho from that restaurant I can't remember and bring it on by for you.
All right. I would love to go there with you and sit and eat it.
Remote podcast. Let's do it.
Let's
do it. Sessions.
That sounds amazing. Julian, thank you so much for your time today and for sharing all of this amazing information and your stories and your travels and your dissertation with us. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And we have one more song, and it is a cover. Do you have any words about this, or does it speak for itself?
I mean, like I said, like with the Japanese breakfast song, you try to shout out people who maybe not everyone's heard of. So this next artist, I think, is a young person from New Jersey, like myself, is writing some very interesting things about the identity of being an American, but also having this connection to the Vietnam War. It's a fascinating, new, promising band, and I think you all should check it out.
And I hear he's in upper management too.
Yeah, he's the boss.
He's the boss. It's No Boy live on KEXP at home. Thank you all so much for watching. Subscribe to the KEXP YouTube channel to see more live sessions and find out more information at kexp.org. Julian, thank you so much again.
My pleasure.
And this is Born in the USA from No Boy live on KEXP at home.
Oh, we're going to close this set with a song that everybody should know. Born down in a dead man's town, the first kick I caught was when I hit the ground. Like a dog that's been beat too much, till you spend half your life just covering up. Born in the USA, I was born in the USA, I was born.
Born in the USA,
I was born.
born in the USA.
Got in a little hometown jam, so they put a rifle in my hand, sent me off to a foreign land to go and kill the yellow man. Born in the USA, I was born. Born in the USA, I was born.
Born in the USA,
I was born.
born in the
USA. I had a brother at Quezon, fighting off them Viet Cong. They're still there and he's all gone. He had a woman he loved in Saigon. I got a picture of him in her arms now. Born in the USA, I was born in the USA, I was born.
born in the USA,
Oh, I'm a long gone daddy in the USA. Born in the USA, I was born.
born
In the USA, I was born. In the USA, I'm a cool rockin' daddy in the USA.
Discover new music at listener-powered KEXP.org.